First thing I'd like to do tonight is actually have each one sort of give just a minute or 2 minutes of their testimony, how they came to Christ, so that we can kind of get to know them. So, Sheriff, would you like to begin?
I'll be happy to. Good evening. I'm Sheriff Alameen Hush with Hernando County. Pleasure to be here. Some of you may wonder why I'm so far away from home, and it's because my daughter goes to school here, and so I was kind of obligated to come. Not that I wouldn't come anyway, but all kidding aside, I was telling Mr. Moyer, who's an adjunct professor here, I love doing this stuff because it's important to support a Christian school and of course our young people. I was fortunate that I grew up in a Christian household, actually not far from here, just south of here in Pinellas Park, and Christian Reformed Church, and my family was very adamant about going to church and so forth, and so I don't have any particular day that I can point to that I can say that to me it was just like my biological parents. God was always in my life, and very important part of my life, and always has been. My daughters also has been very important for us to bring them up into discipline and instruction in the Lord. They've always gone to a Christian school, and I think it's been a very wise investment. And so that's pretty much. I've been in law enforcement full-time since 1989. I worked about half my career with the Division of Alcoholic Beverages and Tobacco, working for the state of Florida. And then the second half of my career, I've been in the sheriff's office just about exactly 10 years in Pasco as the chief deputy up until January 1st of 2011, when I was appointed to sheriff in Hernando County, and I was elected to that post a couple years ago. So I've been sheriff for 4 years. So.
Great, thanks.
Lieutenant Bill Bird. I'm the stand-in. I was ordered to come here. No. Actually, pray for Keith. He's not feeling very well, but a great opportunity for me. And when I came, I didn't realize how many friendly faces and familiar faces I would see when I got here too. I too have a very boring testimony. I was raised in a Christian home, raised in the church. I don't really have a dramatic story, but for some of you might have heard of the singer Merrill Womack. He was a gospel singer, and actually as a 6 or 7 year old boy, I was just absolutely enthralled with him and his story of the challenges he went through in his life. And that was my definitive moment as a child, walking the aisle at a Merrill Womack concert in Battle Creek, Michigan. But other than that, I've always been raised in the Christian home, in the Christian family, the Christian school down here in St. Petersburg, and then kind of accidentally meandered my way actually into career in law enforcement. It wasn't something that I sought out anyways. I think it was something that kind of came and found me, and I've been there now for 22 years, and I'm not sure what I'm going to do when I grow up, but I think I'm going to stick with it. So. Run for sheriff? Maybe run for sheriff.
My exciting testimony, I'm Michael Trill. I was saved out of drugs and alcohol at the age of 5. Actually, I was born and raised in a Christian home. Obviously, that doesn't make me a Christian. At the age of 5, I did pray to receive Christ, and as I got older, about 12 years old, I started having doubts and concerns about what I believed and whether or not I was going to get to heaven. I reconfirmed my relationship with Christ and asked him to be my Lord and Savior when I was 12 years old. I can't tell you the date, but I can tell you my father came into my room and prayed with me, and he's over there. I can tell you Close Encounters of the Third Kind was on, because that's what he was watching when I came out of my room. So if you can research that in the 1980s, you'll find out what day it was. In regards to salvation, it is an ongoing process. Obviously, we are saved, we are justified, but we're not glorified yet. It's an ongoing process, and just for where I come from, it's not just saying a prayer, ominous dominus, and happy birthday, you're saved. You actually have to mean it. You have to give your life to Christ. Currently, became a police officer under the tutelage of this man to my right. Before I became a police officer, you said 1 or 2 minutes, right? Beeman, you were right. This is going to go over an hour. internship in college with the Dunedin Police Department, I did not feel obligated to come here, nor was I ordered. I didn't believe I was going to be allowed on campus because I went here in 1987, and I didn't know if they'd let me back on the campus. I started my career in law enforcement at the Dunedin Police Department. When I was doing an internship in college, I actually used to ride with this man. He imparted a lot of wisdom to me, and I respect him. There's another gentleman over here who was my captain when I first started in police work at the Dunedin Police Department. I'm now with Tarpon Springs. I've been with them since 1995. Currently assigned as a detective sergeant and SWAT and training and stuff like that. But that's not the important part. The important part is my relationship with Christ. All yours, brother.
Okay. My name is Donald Hall. I'm with Clearwater Police Department, and here again myself. I was born in a Christian family, and we were always taught as far as going to church. And I think as far as my time, I accepted Christ probably when I was 12, between 12, my recollection is 12 years old. And then during that time, sometimes I think as I got older, I had to reconnect. Because as you grow older, sometimes like you say, you lose something and then you have to reconnect. And but it's a challenge every day, and especially in the job that we do, because we see so much. But I know I carry him in my heart wherever I go. As far as how I got into law enforcement, I had a cousin that was a police officer, and kind of liked it, kind of enjoyed doing it. And one thing led to another, and 30 years later, I'm still here.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for being here. My name is Luke Williams, and I'm Assistant Chief with the St. Petersburg Police Department. And I actually found Christ on Father's Day in 1975. The sermon was about the prodigal son, and that resonated with me. And like everyone here, I was raised in a Christian family. And basically my parents taught me to always treat others as if I wanted them to treat me. And that's basically what I've taken on into my career as a law enforcement officer. Which, if you had asked me on that Father's Day if I wanted to be a police officer, I'd say, you got the wrong cat, because I was not me. And it was only because I wasn't exposed to the profession. But I know there's no greater profession than the profession that we're all engaged in up here on the stage. And oftentimes we lead ourselves as if Christ led himself, in that we put our lives on the line for our fellow man. And I can tell you that when God said that there be light, he had all us in mind, and he knew we'd be sitting here talking to you all day. So the message that he has and what will come out of this particular conversation is strictly ordained by him, because I know that he's led us to the point where we are. So for somebody that did not want to be a police officer, we didn't know that it would be a police officer, I'm just shy of 30 years. I've been an assistant chief for 14 of those years. And I currently serve as the commander over the Uniformed Services Bureau, which happens to be the largest section of the St. Pete Police Department. So I look forward to this conversation. It's a blessing to sit up here with these distinguished gentlemen. I'm trying to figure out how I got up here.
Only distinguished?
But I look forward to the conversation and the questions. So God bless each of you.
Great, thank you very much. I kind of want to start off the conversation tonight with thinking about the question, what is the biggest threat to your spiritual health? Working in law enforcement. Yeah, go ahead.
I would say complacency. And I think that complacency both from a physical standpoint, where as we're all trained, if you let your guard down, you can get hurt. But also from a physical or a spiritual standpoint, is you let your guard down, you can get hurt, or you can cause someone else to get hurt. So I think that society, as the world has changed, like the word says and like the word tells us and forewarns us, that we're going to be faced with issues and challenges. However, Ecclesiastes says there's nothing new under the sun. So we need to just make sure that as we go through life, that we're continually thinking about those things that God would have us to do and the way that he'd have us to treat people. So I think if we get complacent, and if we, especially those of us that are in leadership positions, if we sit idly by, then we're doing a disservice to the position that God has ordained for us. So I think if you can make sure you're not being complacent, not only in your responsibilities at work, but in your study of the Word, that'll keep you above board.
I'll expand on that a little bit. I agree with that 100%. The complacency is something where that guard comes down. And obviously we're vulnerable with that also in a profession like this, or in, say, a medical profession, or you know, whatever the noble service might be. A lot of times we'll start thinking, you know, because of the things I do, it makes me better, or it makes me deserving. Maybe I've earned my place, and I think there has to be a constant reminder to fight for the complacency that it's not by works, it's not by what I do that earns my place at the cross. It's by what's in my heart, and it's by that gift. So, you know, you can be as good as you want to be here, and when we do the jobs we do, and all the men at this table agree, we see people a lot of times at their very worst. And it's very easy to look at those people and think, I'm better than that. You know, I'm not that person, I'm above that type of thing. And just to remind yourself that, you know, regardless of who they are, the lowest to highest point in their life, you know, God loves us all the same. And so, you know, that's that again, that guard of that complacency that, you know, no one here is better than the other person.
Okay, I'll take that a next step. He mentions that people think that you're better that because of our profession. It's one thing that really, really bothers me is people that have misquoted Matthew. This is blessed are the peacemakers, and that somehow police officers and that all cops go to heaven. And I've heard it at funerals, and it infuriates me that pastors get up and talk about that, because it's your relationship with Christ that gets you into heaven. It's His work, it's His righteousness, not a profession that we have. So that's one thing I always like to speak out about, because it bothers me. And it isn't because we do this job that we're better. What I think, my take on that is influence. Is the influences we're around. Welcome to the dark side when you become a police officer, because you see things, and we say it, and we kind of say it like you guys wouldn't understand. It's us for that kind of mentality. It's actually absolutely true that we see things that average people don't see, they don't understand, and we deal with evil that is in the world. And when you put yourself around that, the Bible says to pick up your spiritual armor and put it on, and to carry a cross daily. And in Ephesians it talks about wear the armor of God. And I'm going to tell you that if you don't have your armor on in this job, you will absolutely start becoming like that what you fight, and having that influence in your life. And then it becomes easy not to go to church. And I'm talking from personal experience. In my years in law enforcement, when I wasn't living right, I didn't want to go to church. So that's something that, I mean, I can only speak personally, I can't speak for these gentlemen, but that's something that I've been around, is the influence. And it's not just the bad guys, and it's just not the houses that we go into, it's other officers that we work with. Anybody that goes to a graduation, you'll hear sheriffs will get up and talk to recruits and say 3 things will get you in trouble: women, money, and alcohol. And that's what you see in a lot of law enforcement. And that has a tendency to creep into lives, and you start becoming numb to it. The old saying, garbage in, garbage out. The more you're around it, if you don't put yourself in the Word, if you don't put yourself with other Christians, if you don't put yourself in church under good scriptural teaching, that's for my pastor back there who just walked in. Speaking of good spiritual teaching, if you don't have that and you don't put on your armor, you are absolutely going to fail, and you're going to go into seasons where you don't want to go to church, you don't want to have a prayer life, you don't want to be in the Word, because you know you're guilty.
And that's a very easy thing to follow. I just want to echo what he said, is that, you know, at some point I had stopped going to church when I first got into law enforcement. You know, I got to that period of time where I just stopped going to church. It started off when I was working, you know, midnights. I was just, okay, you know, and I used to make an effort. I mean, even if I got off at midnight, I would just, you know, have a change of clothes, go into the back of the church, and at least I was there, you know. And eventually I started making excuses that, oh, I'm not going to go because I'm just tired. And, you know, and you need that in our, like I said, we see so much. And after a while, if you don't have that armor protection. And if you don't have that fellowship with other Christian believers, you tend to get fallen in and taken into, sucked into that world that we have to both protect against.
I'll wait till the next one. I think they covered it pretty well.
So, how does a Christian working in law enforcement balance the desire, need, and command to share the hope of Christ? And yet, still somehow remain neutral in the field of law enforcement?
When you say be neutral, what do you mean by being neutral? You mean not getting in trouble for preaching?
Right, yeah. To some degree, you have to keep them separate, no?
I don't think you have to keep them separate. I think you, and this is just my opinion, I think you can share your beliefs with me. That you don't have to be overbearing, but you can share you shouldn't hide it. I mean, you definitely shouldn't hide it. But you know, I'm always of the belief that you let your light shine where they can see your works. So the thing is that you know, as far as to answer your question, like I said, I don't think you have to be overbearing, but you don't have to hide. I mean, you don't have to hide it. You know, if someone asks you if you're a true believer, yes, I am. But I also believe too that you can let your light shine where people will see it and recognize it.
Absolutely, I can add to that. I think the people we deal with, and something I was going to say in the earlier one is, one thing I remember hearing, and I don't know if it was in the academy or what, is that always be careful not to get into the mindset that there are only two types of people in the world, cops and criminals. It's very easy when you're in law enforcement, if you're not one of us, you're one of them, and you'll always have to guard against that. And I think, you know, both sides, both cops and criminals, are often cynical, and I think that the only way you can win over either one of those, if you're dealing with somebody who's going through a traumatic event or somebody else in law enforcement, is by setting an example. Words can oftentimes, to most people, mean nothing. They're going to look at how you act and how you carry yourself, and that you don't shy away from it, but you don't try to force it on somebody, because they're going to be very cynical about it. And I think if you show them that, you know, that as he said, you know, I preach to my people, I shouldn't say preach, but I tell my people all the time, you know, anger, lust, greed, and intoxicants are going to get you in trouble every time. And I say that over and over again, but I also have to show them that, you know, I've been married almost 25 years, and I am so glad that I didn't trade her in for somebody else, you know, and I'm sure that, you know, that it's really by God's grace, I guess, that I wasn't in that spot, but I'm so glad we got over that hump, and it's so much better now. I couldn't imagine, you know, having my children and everything, all that, and I'm not saying that, you know, looking down on anybody, I just thank God that I didn't have to go through that, and I think that's an example, like I said, that, you know, I'm married, you know, I'm married to my first wife, and that's the way it's going to stay, you know, and I think we're going to make it after 25 years. But I think that's what you do. You got to set the example. You can't tell somebody, you know, do this and do that, and then be living any way you want, or not set the, you know, setting the example. So.
Well, I think that's very, very important. That's the hardest thing to do is to live consistently, especially because we all battle with whatever sin we have, and so at work and dealing with those you work, that's probably the hardest because they see you day in, day out. They see you in the mix. They see you in the fights. They see you in the worst case scenarios, and it's easy to drop the ball. And that's the part that stinks for me. I think is when I know people look at me and I go home and I say I screwed up. I dropped the ball because they're looking at me when I'm telling them I'm Christian. Look what I just did. But the living example and speaking and they can see and they can hear what you believe. On calls, obviously you're not going to do a traffic stop and say, you know, you broke the law. And obviously you broke the law because you're a sinner because of the fall of man. So you want to pray with me before I write you the citation. We are, but But also, whether it's at work or you're dealing with people on the street or on calls, God will also make openings for you to say something. I mean, I've been on plenty of calls where a guy wants to bring up the Bible and I'm like, ding. Oh, you're in for it, Bob. Here we go. Because especially that, I'm not even broaching the issue. They're broaching the issue, and then you can share with them the gospel or biblical truths with what they're saying. And sometimes, I mean, I do it selfishly just to prove them wrong, which isn't, I'm confessing to you all. But there will be opportunities, and there'll be people that come up to you at work that even when you've dropped the ball so many times, and they've seen you drop the ball so many times, they go, hey, what do you believe about this? And then you have the opportunity to share with them. And it's not being a pious, do-gooder, look at me, I'm religious, I'm a Christian. It's not like that. It's, living it out, and they see you and they trust you and be able to talk to you. So I agree that it is your influence and your testimony that you're living out, but it's also, you will have chances to talk about Christ.
It is stressful, knowing everybody's looking at you, particularly those who don't believe, and they're waiting for you to mess up, and they're waiting for you to drop the ball, and we do, we're human, but you still got to keep trying and be aware of that, and remember that you're trying to be Christ-like, and we're not going to do it, but we should still try. We can't be perfect, obviously, but we should try.
I think it's a great question because when we look at society, what society accepts, you can say almost any curse word you want on television now and there's no repercussions. But if you say in Jesus' name, people look at you kind of but that's what I believe in and that's what I'm going to say. And oftentimes I get opportunities to speak with different groups, and I'll tell you up front, this is who I believe in, this is what I serve. Next time you don't like me, you don't have to invite me back. But I think that what I've heard up here is exactly what I think. You let your light shine, and people will come to you, and you get opportunities to talk about what you believe in, and you do it through the leadership and the way that you make your decisions. You look at fairness, and you look at things, and you have to pray, you have to meditate, and all these problems and decisions that we have to make on a continual basis, you have to really humble yourself down and meditate and pray about these things. And for someone to say, does the chief pray to God and God makes these decisions? Well, yeah, he does. and because if you've actually invested the time to think about the repercussions of your decisions and what's fair and what would be Christ-like, and how you, even if somebody's been a screw up their whole career, you still got to be patient and forgiving and loving, just like Christ would have us to do. But you also have to be accountable to the citizens that you serve with those decisions. So I think it's a great question. You get into the council meeting and people are jumping all over the word Jesus Christ, the name Jesus Christ, and I will always say it. And if you don't like it, fire me, because my rewards in heaven, not here. So that's just the way I look at it. But no, you have to make sure that when you talk to people, because there are different beliefs, you can't even say Merry Christmas in some aspects, or Happy Holidays. But the people, the true believers know who you can, they know where to come. If you let your light shine, like Deputy Chief said, they can come to you and have those conversations, both internally and externally.
What would, maybe just one or two or maybe three of you, what's the best way for a Christian working in law enforcement to impact the profession for good or for Christ?
I'll jump in on that. It's been more evident to me as I've moved through the ranks, and certainly not about my own work, but it's been the hand of God's guided those things and put me in places that they want to be in. But one of the things I've had to come to grips with myself is putting away the ego and realizing that a good supervisor is a good servant, and I think that's the way I've tried to coach myself, and then as well coach some of the people that come up behind me is that you really want to demonstrate what this job is all about. We're supposed to be public servants, but we're also servants to each other, and it's really the higher you go, the more of a servant you are, to the people that you work with, that work under you, if you will, and to the public. And you're never going to excel at this job if you think it's about you. You're going to you truly will fail. You know, you have to understand the mind of a servant.
Every 100%. You know, I've made a practice since I've been over uniform services. I kind of look back to when I was actually in patrol and doing the Christmas and Thanksgiving holidays. We never saw anybody from the staff. And so the mindset was nobody cares about us. We're out here working. And so every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, around the clock for the read-offs, my wife, it drives me crazy because she don't know what time to fix dinner. I go to read-offs every read-off prior to the officers checking on the street just to say, you know what, I know you're out here and I really appreciate it. And so does the chief and the rest of the staff. But I wanted to come and just tell you all thank you for being out here, because you may not hear from the citizens, but they appreciate the fact that you're able to enjoy Christmas or Thanksgiving because you're out here. And you don't know how many miles that goes with the officers just for someone to say thank you. So being a servant leader is just that. You know, people, sometimes people get into positions for the wrong reasons. And you really can't take your blessings for granted. You got to understand that God has put us in these positions for specific reasons. And as long as you're meditating and talking and praying to Him, He will guide you on some decisions. And sometimes you come out looking like gold and you wonder how it happened. It's all the fact that, well, how do you think to do that? Well, it really wasn't me. It's just, you think about what Christ would have you do. And that's basically how you got. Now, if you were to say that to a person, you probably end up on YouTube or somewhere saying that, you know, Christ directs the St. Petersburg Police Department. Well, yeah, He does. But He's doing it through me and through Chief Holloway and many other people. So being a servant leader is very extreme.
We kind of touched on it just a little bit earlier, but I want to get back to how you juggle the demands of shift work and the demands of law enforcement and still being involved in ministry at your local church and those kinds of things, all that entails.
Coffee.
Or is it a hint? Do I need to get you
It's a
one?
blessing. No, I've got some. I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah, you can't be a Catholic and not like coffee.
No.
I don't like coffee. I like caffeine. It's like 300 milligrams, like 6 cups of coffee. I'm on one right now.
Oh, okay.
I'm on one.
You know, I think it is difficult, and as somebody said earlier, you know, there's and the higher up in rank you go, even though you may not be working shift work, you're oftentimes busier, your hours are longer, and your commitments are more, and the hours are strange, and you never know when you're going to get a call, and on top of all that, and so it's very, very easy. It's very easy to let that stuff slide, but you have to make time. And we don't do a very good job of it. Probably, I bet if people up here were honest, we don't do a very good job of balancing home and church and work. But you can't stop trying, because you realize when you do, as we said earlier, you can start feeling it. You know, God will convict you and let you know that. Send messages. You know, I think we've all probably gotten those little messages, those little hints that were like things slide. So.
I have, and the man that should be sitting here, Keith, is a friend of mine. We go back to literally middle school together and come up through our careers together, and we still work brothers in Christ too. And we know each other's past, so we can't fool each other, because I know what he did in high school, he knows what I did too. But we share devotions occasionally, and he sends me an email every once in a while. And one of those lit me up one day, and I remember talking to him about an hour on the phone one night on the sheriff's time. But what it basically dealt with was tithe, and that's one of those touchy subjects that churches sometimes even try to stay away from this tithe. And what I took that and parlayed that into and asked him to be my commitment partner with is a tithe of my time. And so I said, well, a tithe of my time will be 24 minutes a day. And I can find time to watch my Fox News. I can find time to whatever the needed chore might be that I think I have to do. But, the question I ask myself is, can I tithe 24 minutes of my day? And so regardless of my money, regardless of what I'm doing or whether I actually make it to the sanctuary, because we do work bizarre schedules now. I might not actually make it to the house, but I can at least give that 24 minutes a day. And so, that's one of the ways I kind of balance it.
It's making a commitment, plain and simple. You have to commit yourself to that. It's a little more, I don't know where the rest of these guys stand, it's a little more heavy on me because I have those 2 children out there that look at me. And if I'm the head of the house and daddy's making excuses not to go to church, what kind of leader am I? So that actually helps motivate. But it's part of that. How do you do it? Well, number one, you have to be in the Word, which I fail at all the time. And you have to be there in prayer, and which I fail at all the time. And it's making a commitment to do that, to do it for the Lord, to have a relationship, and to do it for your family as a father, because you're and a husband. You're called to do that. So I think it's having the devotion, having the prayer, and seriously making a commitment that if you're tired, you're tired. I mean, obviously you can't go to work and not be in the game and get yourself hurt, but there'll be other opportunities too. I used to do when I talk about when I kind of like stopped going. There was still Wednesday night I could have gone to. I just didn't. I'd make the excuse I work Saturday night, midnight, so I can't make it Sunday morning. Well, I could have made it to a Sunday night service or a Wednesday night service or a Bible study during the week, but there was no commitment there, and I think that's what it is making that commitment to understand that you need it and doing something about it. And yeah, weird hours, don't even get me started. I did make it for the music portion on Sunday.
Well, and by the way, I'm marking this down for 2 24-minute periods to be here. So.
You're ahead, even though.
No, I just want to kind of echo what Sergeant said. I think it is a constant, you have to constantly keep working and constantly keep committing toward it. And, like you said, we all fall short, but that's the reason why we have our personal Savior to help us, but it's a fight. You have to stay, you have to stay on top of the game, and when you don't stay on top of your game, then that's when things start happening. But it is a constant battle that you have to, but you also have to be committed to want to do that battle. Okay, because it's not easy, but you have to be constantly, you have to be committed to doing it. But as you said, the reward is greater on the other hand than just the
I'll agree. It is a challenge, and what makes it even more of a challenge is that as Christians, we get beat down the whole thing. And sometimes it seems like there's, correct me if I'm wrong, there's more hell on the inside of the police station than there is on the outside.
That's because of the guys with bars on their shoulders.
So I've actually been, God has worked on me because there's been times I go to church and I need to be re-energized myself, and I go there with the focus of, I need to come here, I got to get this word, I got to get this teaching, and I want to understand it. But then you have 10 to 15 people come up to you with police questions. It's like, I did this all week, man. I'm trying to get my praise on, But then God convicted me and said, well, you're probably the only police officer they're going to see. If they got a problem in the question, I place you here so they have access to you. And so sometimes that, it's like, okay, I do men's ministry 6 a.m. on Saturday, and then, I might say, you know what, I don't feel like going this week. But then it's like, no, get up and go, because the only Christ that people see sometimes are us. And so I got convicted on that, and now I entertain the questions, I take all the phone calls, as tough as it may be sometimes. And I haven't realized that that's why he put me here.
But men's ministry should never be at 6 a.m. For the record.
And you got to go by the
Well, what I want to do at this point is kind of turn a corner. Earlier, I failed to mention who I am. I'm going to apologize now for that. I'm Jared Leinbach. I teach the criminal justice courses, at least many of them. I've got 2 of my adjuncts here this evening, Mr. Bruce Mills, and Mr. Brian Moyer. Together, the three of us teach the entire criminal justice program here at Clearwater Christian College. I'm abundantly blessed to have both of these men who have together combined almost 60 years of law enforcement experience, which is fantastic for the students here. So what I want to do now is take an opportunity to sort of open up the floor and have you guys ask questions, perhaps specifically, which is why I've got the name cards here. So if you have a question for one of these fellows specifically, you can do that, or you can just kind of address it generally. So
Before you begin, not only do those two gentlemen, who I know personally, both of them, have over 60 years experience in law enforcement, know what they're doing that, they have some sound biblical doctrine in them. And I'll tell you that right now, from knowing both of them, if you look at two godly men, two godly police officers, those two guys. Just a commercial for them. I'm not getting paid.
yeah, go ahead.
So my name is Christian Crawford. I'm actually looking at a number of departments to put an application to coming up in the next few months. And one of the hard things for me is trying to anticipate possible challenges that may arise. So I was curious, what were some challenges that you each faced whenever you were first going into law enforcement that you didn't anticipate, and how did you overcome that?
Take us from the horse to the car, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, the truth of the matter is, I said law enforcement picked me, and I'll point to Bruce Mills because the truth be known is, I was seeking a job in law enforcement, and I was taking the advice of the people in the past. The Screening Service said, take the first job that comes along. Get some experience under your belt, put some food on the table. Then after that, once you get experience, you can maybe pick and choose the agency that fits you best, but get into it though. Bruce, against probably all of his better decision making, called me in for an interview, and I think it was actually not a setup the way they did it, but called me in for an interview, and they wound up actually hiring me. And but the advice I would give you right now is, obviously someplace maybe as close to where your home is that benefits you. The differences between these departments that are represented up here and even a lot of the other local departments that aren't represented are going to be minuscule. You're going to see the same politics, the same good things, the same negative things at all those departments. Big, large, whatever the case they think might be. And if I could say anything from the honest heart, is if you don't have a star on your shirt, you're really not a law enforcement.
See these stars over there?
I don't know, I only see one star. I'll speak to you realistically. If you're graduating, are you going to college here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, if you're graduating, you are at a somewhat of a disadvantage now in the time because there's so many already certified, already experienced officers. So using that, if you get offered it, put your stuff out there, be yourself. There's nothing really that you can do extra. You don't have the experience, you won't have the experience until you're hired, but put out all over and don't get discouraged about it. And don't just say, oh, I'm giving up. If this is something that you see, I know the ministry has a call. That's why this is the greatest profession and the most important profession, because I don't believe that being a pastor is a profession, it's a calling. But I'll tell you right now, I feel that God hardwired me for this job, because I would say I couldn't work in an office because they throw me out, but actually I work in an office now and they want to throw me out. To me, this is really important. If you're hardwired for it, you got to do it, because you won't be happy doing something else. And if that's what the Lord wants you to do it. Put your stuff out there. If a smaller agency that has 6 people picks you up, and if you can't get to go there, get that experience, and then you'll have that experience when it comes around somewhere else that says we're only looking for experienced officers. So you are at a disadvantage, but here's the thing. God's in charge of your sovereign. Where God wants you to go, you're going to go. You're going to get the job that you want. You're going to get promoted when He wants you to. That He wants, the job that He wants. You have no He wants. I'm not a name and a claimant guy. But the job that he wants you to have, you'll have. The promotion that he wants you to have, you'll have. And you get, if you focus on yourself instead of him in this job, you'll get discouraged. You'll get upset. You'll break things at the house. Oh, sorry. But then you come back to God is sovereign. God's in charge, and there's nothing you can do about it regardless. So just give it to him and pray about it.
I'll tell you what I was saying earlier about, God convicting you when you slide away. If you listen, he'll point you in a direction. And I could probably talk a whole hour on things that have happened to me, but how I really got into full-time law enforcement is I was working, I volunteered for the Marine Patrol. There isn't one anymore, but there used to be a Marine Patrol. And I was actually got a part-time position with them, certified. And I was doing that, getting paid to ride around in a boat. And man, I was loving life, and it was great. And my father passed away, probably one of the most difficult times in my life, and I realized I need to grow up now. And so I started looking for a job, and ironically enough, I was working at a place in Clearwater. It was a game room, pool tables and so forth. And a kid had come in to pay for, he was playing some pool or some video games, whatever. And when he opened his wallet, there was a badge in there. And he quick closed it, and he had a very guilty look on his face. And my keen police mind told me something was wrong here. So I asked him for the badge, and it was Division of Alcoholic Beverages and Tobacco. And I said, man, who in the world are they? But I said, you're not supposed to have this, so I took it from him, and I returned it to the agency. And I was looking at the Marine Patrol, but I'd have to go to Tallahassee for 26 weeks and leave my mom, who was just recently widowed. And I went in there and I returned it to him. He says, by the way, we're hiring if you're interested in a job. And long story short, they had a special interview for me in Orlando, and I was hired within a very short period of time. And I look back on that, and I can see God's hand all over that. And so if you listen, God will show you the way. I promise. And there were a couple promotions that I was devastated. I had one taken away from me before I actually even got it. I had a letter and everything, and I was devastated, embarrassed. But it worked out for the best. I ended up getting a better position in a better area, and I really look back now and I say, man, there is definitely a God, and he's definitely involved in people's lives. He's not just sitting up there watching. And so that's my advice to you. Just listen. You'll be pointed in the right direction. I guarantee it.
I would say that when you do become a police officer that you will be, is that you realize that the small percentage of the people that you're running across that are having that bad day, or in some instances you're going to allow or you're going to make them have a bad day by giving them a citation. Now, that's just basically a minute part of the population. And by and large, most people out here are looking to do the same thing that you and I are looking to do. That's to have a successful life, be able to raise their family, and enjoy themselves. But I think too often, like we said earlier, when we see some of the worst of the worst, so just don't get jaded when you get into it and think that everything that you see is difficult. When I worked as a burglary detective, and I come in on Mondays, and there was 200 burglaries that happened over the weekend, I thought that's all that was going on in the city of St. Petersburg. People breaking in and people's stuff. But when you look at it from 30,000 feet, you see that you have a lot of support out there from people. But the only way you damage it is if you do things that are not Christ-like, and if you treat people differently than you know you should. So I'd say just focus on making sure you treat people like people. And the Bible says what you do to the least of these, you do to me. When you're dealing with homeless, when you're dealing with those types of circumstances where it's like you'd rather not, you never know who you're entertaining. So just make sure you handle yourself that way.
No, I was going to say is I truly believe that that God is in charge, because if you had asked me, I saw myself being deputy chief of police, I would have said, no way, absolutely no way. Matter of fact, to this day, I can still remember my first call that I took on solo patrol. Matter of fact, I can even remember my interview, which I dare not remember, but I can remember my interview to get on the job. But the thing is, despite that, I still got hired. But I never saw myself here. But I'm a firm believer that Christ is in charge, and you just have to let him lead the way, and just let it happen. Because I had only planned to stay for 23 years, And, you know, and eventually, you know, things just happened or whatever. Promotions came, some promotions didn't come, you know. But the thing was, I just, you know, like I said, you gotta put it in front and just let it happen. And let, you know, we don't understand sometimes why things happen this way. And sometimes we may never understand it. But then there's sometimes, you know, it may be 4 or 5 years down the road we realize that, okay, now I know why it happened, you know. So, but the main thing too is to echo what Luke just said too, is that one rule I try to live by, very simple, and just to treat that person in front of me the same way that I want to be treated. Very simple.
What's a good way for local churches to get involved with police officers and sheriffs to encourage and share the gospel with them?
Wow, good question. I think one of the things that my church is famous for doing, famous, but you know the point, is having, we have a lot of grow groups. It's outside of the structure of the Sunday morning, Sunday evening, Wednesday night, you know, which actually a very comfortable structure for me. I was raised in a very strict Wesleyan church, and you came in, you sat down, you stood up, you sang, you sat down, and I like that format. Church I go to now, we wear jeans and we raise our hands, and all this crazy stuff happens, but it's not crazy stuff. I mean, they sing loud, you know, because we don't have hymn books. But point being is that it's outside of that structure. Well, and to get into that world of the fire service, the law enforcement service, the shift workers, those people who are, they're not on the schedule of normal human beings, is to get out of a structure. And so if you're going to offer a course, if you're going to offer a grow group, if you're going to offer a men's seminar, don't do it at 6 o'clock in the morning. Don't you know, realize that there's other schedules and things to work around. And so if you're going to seek something like that, break from the mold of, you know, we have to do things on this kind of routine or schedule. And who says we can't have a men's breakfast at, you know, 2 o'clock in the morning? You know, Denny's is open. And so, you know, things like that would be probably, you're going to get into their world more than making them come into your world.
Outreach, whatever your outreach, and it's not, and I can tell you from working with guys, not the lamb blast them in the face kind of thing, but being there. A lot of churches have even chaplains.
Yeah, that's right.
Being a chaplain, and that establishes contact. Officers, law enforcement officers in your church living it out and inviting people. We don't get crazy at Cornerstone, but we have fun and we worship.
We should try to.
But doing outreach and just being people, not necessarily coming across as, oh, here come the people who are going to beat down the door. And having law enforcement appreciation days can get them in the door as well. Having special events, just had a special event out at Indian Rocks.
Yeah.
Fellowship with Christian police officers, reaching out and just having things to do that people might try to get them in the door that they wouldn't come in normally, and then outreach and being real and showing love and showing appreciation and not fake. And here's the thing, first of all, don't ever say it's not me, he did it, I give up, or anything like that when you see us, but not overly. We can sense junk, let's put it that way. So if you come up and you're overly sappy with me, I'm automatically gonna go, this guy's overly sappy. You know, but just be yourself. You know, tell people, tell them you appreciate it. Have something, even if it's minor. Hey, here's donuts. God loves donuts. You know? But I don't eat them. I'm at the gym. You know what I'm saying? but just dropping it off. Put the church name on. Just something minor like that. I think that means something. People go, hey, that's pretty cool that they do that. They're real people.
Now, in Clearwater, we have a church that's been during the month of May, they have a service for law enforcement throughout the county. Who all wants to come, including people with the star.
Even those guys.
Made for real cops, we invite others.
Yeah. But no, seriously, we have a church in Clearwater, and the pastor there has been doing that thing for at least over 20 years plus, as far as doing that kind of stuff. And then also too, I think the sheriff said it too, or somebody said it on the panel, was that we have chaplains, our chaplains are volunteers, and that's always something to try to get that gap between the church and some of the officers.
Kind of reiterate what they're saying, but at least in my organization, I think several of them, the chaplain program, but I tell my chaplains, and I have a couple of them that are very involved, but as I kind of said earlier, the cops are very cynical, and we kind of hit on that a little bit. It has to be patience and persistence, and even if you have a law enforcement appreciation day, you got to understand that a lot of law enforcement officers are already going to their own church, so they may not come, and the ones that don't go to church, you may only get one or two, so don't be disappointed if you know the place isn't full. I always try and tell people that because I think they expect, you know, that all 200 deputies of mine will show up, and it's just not feasible. But I think the chaplain, and again, I think that shows your honesty, but it's not something you can come and be, or your church can have a chaplain or your pastor, and in 2 weeks, I tell them all the time, persistence. You got to be there. You got to show that you really mean it. You're investing your time. And I think that's what works, because then cops go, okay, this person's for real. They really do care. They're not just here for the flash in the pan. So.
And the focus should be not proselytization for the church. It should be for a relationship with Christ, with the officer, or
and even a relationship with each other first. Just, you know, and then I think that helps bring people. Of course, God can do it any way He wants. You know, you could be holding a sign on the side of the road. It might work for some people, but I think generally, He wants us to develop a relationship with people. I think that's what He's told us. And
Maybe time for one more question. Yeah, go ahead.
Is there a group that's in Pinellas County, mostly in Pinellas County, for Christian police officers?
Actually, representatives on back to the
Yes, there is. The Pinellas County chapter of the Fellowship of Christian Police Officers is right now one of 3. There are a couple other groups that do fundraising in their faith base, and it's made up of officers. I know, only one of them, 2 of them are really healthy, obviously. Ours, and there's a group of Clearwater police officers that get together that do a lot of fundraising. And the third one you hear of every once in a while, but you don't really know who's in it. So.
I was going to just say, kind of piggyback on that, my husband's been a police officer for 20 years, and sometimes it's hard, I think, just seeing people at yearly events, and you're not at the same church to even know that they're a believer, and even working with them, and you see something, you're like, oh wow, you're a Christian too. And I just wish there was a way, even in, interagency for Pinellas County,
we made a big
have
C
something
for
like that.
Christian.
Or a cross.
Like, hey, Christian.
Yeah. But it's frustrating sometimes, because I think it's, having that prayer time, having it, even if it's a once a month or twice a year, something would be, really a good thing.
Well, that's another thing where we're talking about what can your church do? Maybe hook up with Fellowship of Christian Police Officers and look what you can do as well.
Start a spouses group. There you go. You'll reach the police officer to get their spouse in there. And she'll make you go. Okay, you can say that. But sometimes they need more outreach than we do. They're on their own a lot of times.
Well, I kind of want to end with just sort of one wrap-up question, and that is, what is one thing that each of you would have wanted to know entering the field of law enforcement that you maybe now know, but one thing that you would have wanted to know as a Christian entering the field of law enforcement? Is there just one?
I'll go.
Yeah, that way I can say
what he said.
Yeah,
I agree. I think that, and by the way, I'd like to give, I'll give my thanks to Bruce Mills also, because I don't say it in jest, that he was one of my mentors, and I've gone to him on several issues. You didn't ask any questions, so I didn't bring him up, so I want to at least point out that he's guided a lot of
probably more than he could know by his example through law enforcement. But I think the one thing that I've learned, I wish I probably could have known, I didn't know back at the time, and I've told now a lot of my subordinates, is that in spite of all the glamour and the glitz and the uniforms and the you know, the toys and the cars and everything else, is that we remind ourselves it's just a job. It's noble, it's a public servant, but it is a job though. It's not the job, it's a job. And it's a means how we support our family and provide the lifestyle for our family. It's an important one, granted, but it doesn't give anything less importance to people who don't do that job. And I say that because I caution a lot of people during their career counseling that I do with me to tell them, don't put this job before the other things in your life that should be first. You know, understand that the patch on your sleeve doesn't define you, you should define the patch. And, you know, that patch is going to be gone one day. Each of these men at this table are going to retire one day, and this job is going to keep on going a long time without them. And in my case, I know that the machine will run smoother when I'm gone, probably. But my family will be the ones that will still be there, though. And you know, like the sheriff said, I mean, I'm way behind. I'm still on my first wife too, and so I've got to kind of pick the pace up. But the point is, though, is that family hopefully is still there, and they don't meet your guts when the retirement is done and this job is done. And so I think that's maybe because I know I spent about the first 10 years of my life answering the call of the job and letting them take a back seat. And you know, I finally told my wife it's her turn now. You know, and it's been long too overpassed though. And I wish I would have gone into it with that mindset that, you know, this is just a job.
And I can add on that. Every new employee I sit down and I talk with, and one of the things I wish somebody would have told me is that, you know, like Christ was tempted, you know, and said, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? You know, the devil still does that with us, sometimes with our coworkers. And I know this may be hard to believe, but cops complain a lot. And you know, I let that affect me to the point where I came home and I tell and this is exactly what I tell every new employee. I say it a little bit in jest, but there's a lot of truth to it, that, you know, my wife is a saint and she's a lot smarter than I am. And I came home in a really bad mood one day and she said, do me a favor, I know that you're upset with the job, but just do me one favor. And I know she could have said, you know, just suck it up and go back to work because we have a mortgage to pay. Of course, I would have thought she doesn't understand what I'm going through. You know, she just doesn't know what it's like being a cop. Or she could have said, you're right, those jerks, they don't appreciate you a bit, you need to quit. And I probably would have quit. But she said, very profound, she said, just do me a favor, find another job before you quit this one. And what that did instantaneously is it made me think that, you know, I really don't have it that bad. But it was my coworkers who were complaining, and I let them get inside me like the alien from the movie and take over my body to the point where I almost ruined my career, or at least would have set it back. And I would venture to say that every person at this table, if they were honest at one time, was in a bad mood because of the people they worked with, talking about how crazy the bosses were, and how bad our equipment was, and how low we're paid.
It's true.
Yeah. Exactly. But you know, that's I wish I would have had that going in and be forewarned about the attitude of those people I work with. So,
He's nuts.
Yeah. No, I think for me, I think the one thing, if I remember the question, I'm sorry. For me, I think it was patience. I think now I tend to, and it's probably because, you know, 2 kids later, but no, seriously, I think for me is just having a little more, I mean, if I knowing now that I have that mechanic, I think it's patience, a little maturity, a little more maturity. I thought I was always mature, but just a little more maturity. But the other thing too, and I think this gentleman hit upon it too, is that I was one of those individuals that put the job first. And my wife kept saying, you know, you take a big, and I was to a point where I had given the city back vacation time because I would never take any vacation, you know, and I was working what we call extra duty jobs, or off duty jobs, however some agencies name it. And my wife said, why are you working on those jobs? You know, it's not that we're rich, but it's like, why are you working on jobs? But the thing was, each one of those jobs that I was working was taking time away from her because, you know, I would go and do an 8-hour, 10-hour job, day of work, and then I'll go run off to do a baseball game or an off-duty job, whatever it is we have. So, you know, it turns into a 14, 15 hour day. And I would do it on the weekends, which most of the time is when our spouses are off on the weekends. So the thing is, I think for me, knowing what I know now is patience, maturity, and the one thing is, like you said, I try to tell, especially around new officers, I said, especially ones that who've had children or had babies, I said, let me tell you something. It's true what they say, they do grow up fast, and it says, and if you don't take the time to really enjoy that time within a family, I guarantee you, you will regret it. You will regret it, because if you don't take that time to catch it, you know, you may not be able to catch every soccer game or a baseball game, but if you don't show some kind of interest to your children, you know, and put this job into perspective, like you said, it's a job, that's all it is a job. I love it, but it's a job. And, you know, but if you don't take that time to spend some time with their kids when they're at age of softball, you're gonna regret it.
Time is a commodity.
You will regret it, and that's just the biggest thing I tell you. You will regret it.
I think the most important for me is that if I could go back, I would probably try to immerse myself more in the book of James. It tells you how to carry yourself in a number of ways, and when to speak, when not to speak, you know, how to speak, and how do you let other people teach your home, you know, teach your home. And too often we're in a profession where individuals want to get into these positions so they understand the dynamics of the position they're in. So sometimes people will step on others and do things that will, you know, you think that, well, it must be great to be an assistant chief, but it's really not that cool. I mean, we have a lot, and I can only imagine what the sheriff goes through. But I think if I could rewind and go back, I could look at the book of James a little more closer and try to infuse that a little bit more in my life earlier on in my career. I think it would have saved, I can be pretty dogmatic when there's something I believe in, and I think it's right and it's fair. I had the tendency to, you know, really not let it go like a pit bull on a piece of meat, and I would just stick with it, and that's just my nature. But as I matured in the Word, I've learned to step back and just let God's plan take its place, because ultimately, if you're right and you've prayed about things, it's going to come full circle. And we're just primarily catching up with His plan, because His plan is going to be where it's going to be. We just have to catch up.
She said.
There's one thing I would go back, it's be more prepared for the spiritual battle that goes on. In regards to the question is, what would I have done looking at it as a Christian? Because you know, you go in and you know it's going to be fun, you get to drive fast and shoot guns. You know, that's pretty cool. And you think about that, and you start dealing with people, and you don't know the effect that this job can absolutely have on your spiritual life. And you got to be going into it sober-minded about it, that you know that it's going to be a daily struggle to do the right thing. It's going to be a daily struggle to live that example we talked about earlier. It's going to be a daily struggle not to let the stress and the complaining and everything else that comes with this job affect your spiritual life, because it's so easy to drop the ball. It's so easy to get off. It's so easy not to daily study. It's so easy not to daily take up your cross and follow me. And that would be my thing, is going into it knowing you're going to go through a lot. So be prepared, because we're ready to swat. Throw it all on when it's go time. That excites us, but we got to throw it all on go time every day for spiritual confrontations.
Well, thank you very much. As long as these fellas can stay, I know some of them have to get back to a shift even. So as long as they're willing to stay, please, by all means, engage them in personal conversation. Let me just finish us up with a word of prayer, and then we'll cut you loose. Our precious Heavenly Father, thank you so much for how you worked this evening and how you've enlightened each one of us in the various struggles that law enforcement officers face on a daily basis, dare I say, on a minute basis. So Father, we just ask that you would put a hedge of protection around each of these men and around each of the officers who are in this room now but not on stage. We ask for your protection for them physically as well as, and more importantly, spiritually. So Father, be with us as we go from this place tonight and help us to continue to glorify you in everything we say and that we do. In Jesus' name.